Vogel claimed that she spoke with a police officer at the scene of Hayden Panettiere's death, and she asked if there would be a further investigation. And Vogel claims the officer brought up Brian Hickerson's name, and Vogel allegedly told the officer she thought that he would be culpable. Now, again, no charges have been filed in this case, and Brian Hickerson has not been accused of any wrongdoing. Vogel also told the Daily Mail that she found Brian's timeline of events to be, quote, full of holes, including when he allegedly found Panettiere unresponsive. Now, Vogel said, quote, I don't know how you can take a nap near someone who is dying.
I don't know how you can take a nap near someone who is dying and not realize something's wrong. How do you do that? That question, posed by Leslie Vogel, the mother of the late Hayden Panettiere, is not a rhetorical flourish. It is a structural indictment. It sits now inside a case file where the Greenville City Police Department has made one thing clear: the preliminary investigation found no signs of foul play. Read that sentence again. No signs of foul play. And yet the DEA is involved. And yet a bag of 9 medications was handed to law enforcement. And yet the timeline of August 16th collapses under its own weight. This is what it looks like when an official narrative and a physical reality refuse to sit in the same room.
6 years old. And people are also looking for answers about what exactly happened the day that she died. Now, as of today, there is still an active investigation by the Greenville City Police Department in South Carolina, and the DEA is involved at the federal level. Now, we're also still waiting for the toxicology reports. That's going to be huge when those come in, but those can take anywhere from weeks to months to complete. And while there are currently no arrests made in connection to Panettiere's death, there are some new details about her alleged toxic relationship with a man named Brian Hickerson. And those allegations are coming to the forefront. And that includes a history of domestic violence, which Hayden addressed publicly in the past. And most recently, her own mom accused Hickerson of pawning off Hayden Panettiere's belongings. And remember, he was also at the scene when Hayden was found unresponsive. So, as you can imagine, speculation has been mounting about whether he could have had some role in what happened to Hayden, though we want to be clear that no criminal charge.
Before we go deeper into what the documents actually show, make sure you're subscribed to Beyond the Gavel File. Because we don't just cover the story, we follow the evidence. Think of the scene as a locked room with a window that never opens. The Greenville Airbnb becomes that room.
Panettiere. So according to a report from TMZ, Hayden and 37-year-old Brian Hickerson traveled to Greenville, South Carolina together on August 15th. And that is where they rented an Airbnb. Now, his brother is named Zach, and he was staying in his own Airbnb in the Greenville area. So then we go to August 16th. So a day after they arrive in South Carolina, Zach told TMZ that he was trying to get into Brian and Hayden's Airbnb after returning from church, since they reportedly had plans to go get lunch and play some indoor golf after church. He then told the publication, quote, I knocked loudly, which apparently woke Brian up from a nap they were both taking on the pullout couch bed in the living room. When we went in and tried to wake Hayden up for lunch, we realized she was unconscious, end quote. Zach reportedly called 911, and at around 1:51 p.m., he tells police that Hayden was unresponsive and in cardiac arrest, with dispatch audio released in the case indicating that it was an apparent, quote, overdose. But still, at this point, there's been no official cause of death released for Hayden Panettiere. Now, at the same time that Zach was calling 911, Brian, the boyfriend, was allegedly administering Narcan on the actress. That's that nasal medication that can be used to reverse the effects of an opioid overdose. Zach told TMZ that the brothers performed CPR on Hayden while on speaker with 911 as they waited for fire and EMS to arrive. 7 minutes later, first responders arrive on scene and they begin life-saving measures, but tragically,
Hayden Panettiere and Brian Hickerson travel there together on August 15th. They rent the property. His brother Zach stays nearby. The next day, Zach returns from church. He knocks loudly. Brian wakes from a nap on a pull-out couch in the living room. Then they both try to wake Hayden. She is unconscious. Brian administers Narcan. Zach calls 911. CPR is performed. EMS arrives 7 minutes later. She is pronounced dead at 2:32 in the afternoon. That is the official sequence. But the sequence relies on one assumption. that a person can be dying inches away from someone and no one notices. That is not an explanation. That is the absence of
by
one.
CNN. An officer on scene interviewed the brothers, who said that they called 911. The officer reportedly spoke with Zach Hickerson first, who advised that Hayden was his brother's girlfriend. Page 6 also cites from the report that Brian then handed law enforcement a, quote, bag of medication that Hayden was taking at the time of her death, though the names of the medications were redacted. But there were 9 different medications reportedly listed. Now, Narcan was also reportedly found on scene when first responders arrived. The police report also notes that Zach was, quote, very emotional while medical personnel were working on reviving Hayden, but Brian did not become visibly emotional until Hayden Panettiere was declared dead. Now, police said that the preliminary investigation did not indicate any sign of foul play or suspicious circumstances, nor did the initial autopsy find signs of physical trauma or foul play. But, as we mentioned earlier, this investigation remains active.
The pattern here is not new. It is the same pattern that investigators see in cases where proximity becomes pressure and pressure becomes control. Panettiere's memoir, released just months before her death, included a sentence that should be read aloud in every courtroom where domestic violence is minimized. What I never told them was that the abuse I'd endured didn't feel as bad as the thought of being alone. That sentence is the engine of this entire tragedy. It explains why a woman who had hired security in March to keep Hickerson away was found with him in August. It explains why a 5-year protection order had expired in April and why she was traveling with him again within months. The control doesn't end when the order ends. The control just changes shape.
And Hickerson. Now, Panettiere had accused Hickerson of domestic abuse, particularly in her memoir, just a few months ago. She wrote, quote, "What I never told them was that the abuse I'd endured didn't feel as bad as the thought of being alone," end quote. The New York Times is reporting that back in March, Panettiere had reportedly hired security to keep Hickerson away. This is the same person she was found with on the day that she died. Court documents reveal that he was sentenced to 45 days in jail in April 2021 after pleading no contest to 2 felony domestic violence charges for injuring Panettiere. That sentence also came with a 5-year protection order, which expired this past April. Hickerson even came out and apologized after the memoir was released, saying it was true that he was in a dark place that included substance issues, and that it was a, quote, terrible thing I did to her, end quote. The New York Times reports back in August 2022, Hickerson was found in violation of his probation conditions after he and Panettiere were filmed in a brawl with other people outside the Sunset Marquis Hotel in West Hollywood, and he had to complete a year-long domestic violence treatment program, attend Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, and complete dozens of anger management sessions. This is all according to court records. He even tried to get the court to reduce his felony convictions to misdemeanors in 2025, but that was unsuccessful, with another attempt to do so as recently as this month, according to court records.
And here is the moral refrain that must anchor everything. The timeline is full of holes.
Violence incidents were. Mia Terrazas, a neighbor of Hayden Panettiere in West Hollywood, California, told Page 6 in an interview that she saw Hayden with visible, bright red spots and bruises being taken out of her Los Angeles apartment in a gurney on 2 different occasions in 2023 and 2024. So you're seeing these accusations build up year in and year out. Terrazas told Page 6, quote, "It appeared that she had been beaten up. It wasn't apparent to me that it could have been anything else," end quote, adding that Hayden Panettiere allegedly often looked, quote, battered. According to TMZ, Panettiere's HOA also hung up warning posters back in 2025 with Hickerson's face urging people to call 911 immediately to report that he is trespassing on the premises. That neighbor also told Page 6 that she called police several times to report Hickerson at Panettiere's home, though, according to her, Brian allegedly...
Remember those words because they are not mine. They belong to a grieving mother. But they are also the words of forensic logic. The timeline is full of holes. When you hear that Brian did not become visibly emotional until Hayden was declared dead, that is an observation recorded in a police report. When you hear that police went to a family home 3 days later and received no answer at the door, even though someone was reportedly inside, that is also an observation. None of this proves a crime, but it proves that the official narrative has load bearing cracks.
Page 6 reports that officers showed up at the home of Brian and Zach Hickerson's grandmother on Tuesday, August 19th, 3 days after Hayden Panettiere died. Now, she lives about 5 miles from that Greenville Airbnb in South Carolina where Hayden died, and both brothers were reportedly spotted at the family home. Police were seen knocking at the door around 8:20 in the morning and didn't receive an answer, despite Page 6 reporting that Zach was home at the time. Now, officers reportedly returned to the home an hour and a half later and went around the back to conduct a, quote, welfare check.
And here is the question that reframes this entire story as a thriller, not just a headline. If investigators trace the pills from Hayden's body back to a source, and that source leads to a phone, and that phone was wiped clean, then what exactly was someone trying?
Well, the criminality I'm looking at is the Matthew Perry investigation is a very good one to take a look at. We have doctors that were overprescribing, the lure of money and making extra money, maybe the inability to say no. I am looking to see who was enabling her, who was providing her. I'm looking at apps like Telegram, Signal, WhatsApp to see what secret, maybe illicit messaging was going on. Who's providing her what? It becomes criminal when you go beyond a doctor's prescription, right? And you have those in her circle, maybe somebody that was trying to exert some type of control over her, supplying her, feeding her needs to make her more dependent on them. That's one of the things that we have to look at. Brian, and the history of domestic violence in this case, doesn't mean guilt, but it's something that we have to look at very, very closely and very tightly just to see what pressure he may have been applying.
Generally speaking, when you think of like enabling someone, like that particular word, like there might be a case where there's someone who is dealing with addiction and sadly for themselves, they can't be stopped and they find a way to deal with that. And that may be alcohol, that may be drugs. I mean, there's a lot of people who can talk about that, firsthand, or maybe it's impacted their family. But at what point does enabling become criminal? I know with like a doctor, if they're prescribing something, using their power as a doctor to give someone more medication than they actually need, like that, as we saw in the Matthew Perry case, like that's criminal. But like, even if you have someone like a partner, and in this case, a relationship that appears to have been toxic to say the least, up and down for sure, like at what point does that enabling become criminal?
When you're going out to the streets, when you're going out to illicit sources, other than a lawfully prescribed medication, and getting pills for someone, especially with the fentanyl crisis that we have, you can go wherever, to your buddy, to the street dealer, and you don't know what you're getting. And when you know someone is struggling, and when you are providing especially high levels of medication, and you're doing it over and over and over again, that is where we start taking a very
To a race before the paramedics even left the scene. That is not speculation. That is the natural endpoint of a DEA-involved overdose investigation. The toxicology report will not just reveal what killed her. It will reveal where it came from, who supplied it, and whether the money trail points anywhere near the couch where the nap supposedly happened. 9 medications were listed in that bag. 9. Some may have been legitimate. Some may not. Detective Lisa Miller, a retired chief investigator, said it plainly: you cannot look at a pill bottle and assume the contents match the label. You have to count them. You have to test them. You have to ask whether anyone cleaned up. You have to pull the phone records, the financial transactions, the apps where messages disappear. Because in an overdose case, the body is evidence. But the phone is a confession waiting to happen.
Well, I'm looking in that, and we know from reporting that she was having some health-related issues, and I think her mother had even commented about health-related issues that maybe are caused by some of her other addiction issues. I think there was an accident in one of the filmings that she did that had caused her some pain. I want to look specifically at what she was prescribed. Once the toxicology comes in, I want to see if everything matches up. But while I'm waiting, I'm looking at the pills and I'm looking at who prescribed them, what pills were in the containers. Are the pills correct? I mean, are they the pills that are supposed to be in the pill containers? Because a lot of people mix those around. We can't just look at the bottle and say for sure what's inside. If I have any question about whether those pills are actual copycat pills, I'm going to have those pills tested. I'll ask the DA to assist with that. I'm counting how many there were, how many she should have had. And I'm going to look for evidence of like cleanup at the apartment. I'm going to look for evidence that maybe somebody else.
The timeline is full of holes. That phrase now attaches to the moment when a brother says he knocked loudly and woke a sleeping man who was lying next to a woman in cardiac arrest.
Brian and Hayden's Airbnb after returning from church, since they reportedly had plans to go get lunch and play some indoor golf after church. He then told the publication, quote, "I knocked loudly," which apparently woke Brian up from a nap they were both taking on the pullout couch bed in the living room. When we went in and tried to wake Hayden up for lunch, we realized she was unconscious.
It attaches to the claim that no one noticed anything wrong while Hayden was actively dying. It attaches to the fact that a mother, estranged for months, had to ask publicly how such a thing is physiologically possible. You do not need a medical degree to understand why that question is being asked. You need only a basic understanding of human proximity.
These cases get much more attention because of who she was. We do have people that die every day, many that die every day on our streets. I mean, you can drive through the streets of Denver today and see open air drug use. It's a sad fact right now. And often, frankly, we don't see the investigation tracking back as much when it's someone that's unhoused and struggling with routine addiction issues. We may not have the resources going to that investigation as.
So before the toxicology results come back, and before any decision is made about criminal conduct, go read the publicly available Greenville City Police incident report yourself. The language in that report is careful. It is procedural, but read it closely and ask yourself one direct question. Does the sequence of events as described by the two brothers physically allow enough time for everything they claim happened? And if it doesn't, then what was actually happening in that living room before the knock on the door? If this breakdown connected the dots for you, like this video, share it with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe to Beyond the Gavel file with notifications turned on. The evidence doesn't wait. Neither should you.